It is Thursday, April 18th, 2019, and this is the MMA Beat. Welcome, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. I'm the host of this program. I'm from MMAFightingonSBN as well as SiriusXM, joined by three reprobates from a variety of different locations. To my left, where is he from? All the way from Galata, the Galata Tower of Istanbul, Turkey. You know him, the Turkish sensation himself, Danny Segura. Then there's Brian Campbell from CBS Sports. Joining us again at the end, it is the Iceman, the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall from The Ringer, as well as MMAFighting.com. Boys, how we doing?
What's up? Fired up.
Pumped up for the big boxing event this weekend, Brian?
Not bad. Crawford Khan, MSG, the Mecca.
Very quickly, how many pay-per-views is that going to sell?
Not that ESPN would tell you, but I would say probably...
It's on pay-per-view, right?
It is pay-per-view. It's the first top rank on ESPN pay-per-view.
Yeah.
350 would be nice for them,
That's not bad.
But that's a little ambitious, though, to be honest with you.
Yeah, all right, we'll see how it goes. It's at MSG, right? At MSG. All right, but we've got other things to talk about beyond just Nubs boxing. We've actually got good MMA to talk about and bad MMA, so let's sort of get to it. UFC 236 in the books. You went.
Oh, my God, I'm still...
Did you go?
Yeah.
I did not go.
You did not go, okay. You were there at cage side. Now, we've talked a lot... Here it is. It's Thursday. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to go over the same things that every show has kind of talked about at this point. And they've kind of talked about some of these things too, but I really want to look ahead. But before we look ahead right away, let me skip to Brian just because he was there, if I may, Danny.
Of course.
I have noticed in the aftermath of UFC 236, I've seen a lot of talk about, obviously, Israel. I've seen a lot of talk about Max. Kelvin a little bit. Dustin won, and I'm not seeing as much for him. Why am I not seeing very much talk about Dustin Poirier? Because that's not merely the crowning achievement of his career. That is a remarkable feat he pulled off generally. I am not seeing nearly enough accolades for him. Why?
I think from a marketing standpoint, if we're honest, he wasn't supposed to win. I think if you're looking at the way you're mapping out the territory, they maybe expected and hoped Max to win, even though it was more of a 50-50 fight on paper. But ultimately, I think to answer your question, the reason is because that's Dustin's rise. It's been all about putting his head down, workmanlike, one step at a time. There was never a point in the past year and a half where I would have said Dustin Poirier would be, it could be, yes, but would be the last man standing, potentially one step away from the top of the mountain against Khabib when they make that fight in this deep, celebrity, dangerous, violent division. So it's sort of in concert with that. Not a big marketing brand, Dustin Poirier, but a very solid fighter who just has matured step by step and evolved around the way. And it hasn't been an easy ride. It hasn't really been an under the radar ride either. It's been one violent knockout win after another in a row. And he won that weekend. Well, you can argue the co-main event won that week. You know what won that weekend? Whatever they injected in my veins sitting cage side. Because you don't want to go back and rehash everything. I want to rehash it. What a damn feeling when I'm dancing on the ceiling. I mean, there's times, you know, in this business, we're #blessed, and I'm not talking about Holloway, to be that close, to sit in the front row. That night in Atlanta, those last two fights, it was very similar to that feeling at the Garden for 217 with those 3 title fights in a row. I just stood up, just dripping sweat, just dripping. And that's great. Can we bottle that?
Danny,
Can we sell that in the
aside
open
from
market?
Brian's uncomfortable weirdness, is there any other reason why Dustin Poirier is not maybe getting as much talk as he deserves?
I think so. For one is, as soon as Israel won, he got right on the media. He was on every show, just talking about everything. I believe Dustin, the only interview and like the first interview that he did was with you, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Was that yesterday or on Tuesday?
That was Tuesday.
That was on Tuesday. While Israel Adesanya on Monday, he was already on all the shows doing all the interviews. On top of that, when you got somebody named John Jones talking about you, that does stir up your name a little bit more. So, you know, he's got that on his
Khabib did tweet about the fight, though.
Right, but it was very friendly, and we know that in today's age doesn't really sell so much. I mean, he gave his thoughts on the fight. He's like, I thought it was a draw, and I look forward to seeing you in September. That was that. Whereas John Jones had a different standpoint, right? And that definitely stirs something up. And then Adesanya also had time to respond as well, so that obviously was in the headlines. And also, you know, I think the fact that Dustin Poirier's been around for so long, he's already an established name, where Israel Adesanya, he's just coming into this, right? We talk about his 14-month, trajectory leading up to this moment. Like, he's somebody that we didn't know all that well in the last year, and all of a sudden he's a huge face. So people want to know about him. Whereas Dustin Poirier, we know his story. You know, his story has already been told. But nonetheless, it's still a pretty significant achievement. So I think all those things contribute to
anything else, Chuck?
I mean, just to be perfectly candid.
By the way, am I inventing this? I really feel like
I think that's
fair.
true.
Yeah.
And we've seen this type of thing before. A guy comes off of another really big performance for whatever reason, and especially in a situation like this, he wins a symbolic belt that now is a placeholder belt to go fight the main guy. We see those type of things. in the hysteria of the moment, I think they seem really big, but sometimes the die-down period and how fast that happens is why it becomes very strange. That's why we talk about it. And I'm not sure with Poirier. It's almost... Max Holloway for a long time was just kind of a guy that was around. He was a tough guy. We didn't really pay attention to his fights. There was some point when we understood his personality, then he became sort of a cult figure in our sport. And once that happened, I felt like then there was a rooting interest attached to him. Then it mattered to people to see how he performed. So when he beats guys like Ortega, it became a bigger deal. I'm not sure we've ever gotten to that point, like a transcendent point with his personality in terms of Dustin Poirier, where there's a rooting interest behind him. In fact, I felt like in the aftermath, in the hysteria of the moment, it's a big deal, but in the aftermath, there's probably a little bit of a sagging disappointment, like, oh man, but Max could have, you know what I mean? Or it could have been Max versus, and I think that because we were contemplating that fight before with Nurmagomedov, maybe something like that, but he just hasn't reached that, I don't know if it's like a charisma thing, I don't know what it is, but like he just hasn't reached that level yet where he compels you beyond the fight itself.
Yeah, I would also like to add that, one, the Poirier-Holloway fight was fantastic, but the Adesanya, Kelvin Gastelum, just by the nature of both fights, I mean, that was just one of the best fights I've ever seen. So, you know, that itself has people talking. And then on top of that, like, I don't know if there's, you know, a little bit of fatigue from the fans, but like we know the end goal at 185. I mean, the Adesanya-Whitaker, the title unification bout, is the only fight to make it that weight class. Whereas lightweight, dude, you don't know. There's Conor McGregor, there's Tony Ferguson. So maybe fans don't want to maybe invest as much because they don't know what's going to happen.
The danger, I guess, a little bit, just on the last point, but of having two title fights like that, this is a best case scenario in the sense of like you get both fights are really epic so that they're great, but one of them will get drowned out in that sense. Because imagine if that fight had just been your main event.
I was going to say, it's a fight of the year contender.
Exactly. We would be talking about Poirier in a whole different light. So it is unfortunate that he just happens to be overshadowed by...
It's a tough act to follow.
It's all of the above. It's everything we said here that comes together, but it's also, you could argue Max's performance and defeat, the heart he showed, his face falling off, our fear for that, in some ways even overshadowed the performance of Poirier winning.
Interesting. All right, so then let's talk about next steps. Let me ask it in this way. Dana White goes out there and says, oh, for sure, the next fight for Dustin Poirier is going to be Khabib Nurmagomedov. And in fact, put a belt around his waist.
Not happening?
Yeah. Put a ring on his finger, so to speak. But we all know how this game works. Now, again, I think the likelihood, if past this prologue, is that Dustin is going to get it. Let me ask it in this way, Danny. What is the likelihood, barring injury, so let's say injury is not a factor, what is the likelihood that someone skips the line ahead of Poirier next? What would it take for that to happen?
I mean, I think there's obviously a possibility there. But as I mentioned on the MMA Hour on Monday...
How remote?
I mean, if I had to put odds on it, I would still say it's, you know, maybe plus 200, something like that, maybe more.
That's not that crazy.
I mean, you never know what can happen. I mean, there's also, you know, keep in mind with injury, I would say without injury, you know, the odds are probably...
Yeah, with injury, God knows.
Yeah. But man, there's Conor McGregor out there. You know he wants that rematch. We've seen all his tweets the last few weeks. He wants that rematch, and we know that more often than not, he gets what he wants. So
and
you never know.
He and Dana are going to meet in your hometown of Miami. For UFC Fort Lauderdale.
Yep.
Is that what it takes?
Maybe we'll see. I mean, Conor McGregor, we know how convincing he can be, and we know his brand. The only thing that kind of, you know, puts me a little bit at ease that the UFC will do the right thing and give Dustin Poirier his title shot is that, you know, they now have that ESPN deal. So that incentive of, you know, getting those million pay-per-view buys is not really there all that much because now they're getting an upfront payment by ESPN, which should, you know, allow them to play a little bit more on the sporting side of things.
I'm the biggest cynic against UFC in a lot of ways in the decisions they make. They can, barring an injury or Dustin completely pricing himself out in some kind of stupid demand, if they don't give him this title shot, it's how would you ever even remotely justify that decision when they put out an interim title that did not need to be there by any means, and we went up and down the road and argued why it shouldn't be there, and Dana argued why it should. Well, you put it out there, it did raise the stakes, so to a small degree, Dana wins that argument, even though he's still kind of lost.
You sold that idea.
Yeah.
You sold that idea. Exactly. What were you selling when you're selling the last pay-per-view? You're selling the idea that this guy's getting an interim shot, meaning he's going to go against, you're basically selling two fights. You know what I mean?
It's sort of like, you put an interim title out there, you're devaluing the real title, but then if you devalue the interim title, where are we? You can't do that.
So what is the likelihood? Small?
Barring injury, 100%. He's going to get that fight.
Is that right?
I heard it right here.
100%?
Wow.
That is not a claim I'm comfortable making.
I'm very comfortable right now.
You 100% want it. That's what
Chuck, again, it seems unlikely. I think we could all agree there.
Yeah.
What would it take for it to happen, barring injury?
I mean, if it comes down to Conor McGregor saying, hey, I want this fight, I really believe that they're going to consider that. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
I don't want it. As a person who watches the fight, I don't see it as a competitive rematch. I don't see any compelling reason for him to get that rematch other than basically kind of attracting the wider audience and saying, like, hey, they're going to do it again. We recognize these names. I don't really understand why they would put that fight together.
Wider or whiter? Where were you going with that?
Wider.
Okay, just checking. All right.
Although I suppose it could.
By the way, there's another wrinkle to this we haven't considered, which is Conor could come back and say, well, wait a second, I'd like a rematch against Poirier.
True.
And so then Poirier was like in this position where he could defend the belt, get a huge paycheck, a life-altering one. And then, by the way, let's say Conor wins that. I don't know how likely it is, but let's just say it is. And now you're back to a different position.
I love our day and age now. It's like,
You have to consider
after
these
a
things.
fight, you have to consider all this. But then all these managers are going on, right? Like Justin Gaethje's guys are saying, like, well, you know, they're trying to put together that fight with Conor McGregor. You had Cowboy Cerrone is doing it. You never know really what's going on, and you don't know if UFC is actually trying to put together these fights or if it's angling for these fights. It's like the game has changed so much in the last year or so in terms of how people position themselves after a fight takes place.
Yeah.
But
So anyway, unlikely, but a link.
yeah,
100%? Ooh,
I don't
that
know
is
about that
a
one.
I like that.
that is a perilous.
I'll go out on limbs.
That's a
I'll live
perilous
on the
thing.
limb.
All right, so let's talk very quickly about the next. Let's talk about the next step for Max. People have said we talked about them on Monday on the MMA Hour about whether or not he should go back to 145. Very quickly, let me just get your reviews on this. I don't think any of us think his days at 155 are done. But when do they resume, Brian?
Instantly. Dana, after the fight in the press conference, you can take that for what it's worth. But it's funny, for as much as he was pushing Max out the door 45 and into 55 for this fight, now he was like, I was wrong. Max is much more a featherweight. You saw the difference in punching power, which, by the way, in round one was a major eye-opening moment there. He goes back to featherweight, and I think I got it down. I think it makes a lot of sense. You put him in there against Frankie Edgar, a guy who's been right around getting that title shot for a while, was supposed to happen. He's coming off of a win, which helps you. And the reason why is this. You're not going to do the Aldo trilogy right now. You're not going to do the Ortega rematch right now. You book Aldo and Ortega against each other, and the winner gets a title shot. And then you book Volkanovski and Moicano against each other.
Yeah, but
so you sort of put the
Aldo
next one
fighting at UFC
Yeah.
237?
Yeah.
Against Volkanovski.
Yes.
I thought that was on the ropes.
It is on the ropes, but it hasn't been canceled yet.
All right. Well, barring that, I think that's the right move. Aldo wants to fight for a title in his last bout. There's a lot of reason to believe UFC wouldn't give him that. But if he beats Ortega and is coming off of a 3-fight win streak, I'm not saying I want a trilogy fight with Max, but that would make a lot of sense. But to answer your question, Frankie Edgar next. And it's not, Edgar's 37, it's not a stay busy, get well fight, but it's as close as it could be style-wise where you'd like that for Max.
I mean, his 13-fight winning streak is intact at 145. So basically, if he goes back down there, they still have the exact same commodity they had before.
Right.
That's where it didn't hurt him to go up and try his hand at 155. So
Although he took a beating.
he did. And obviously, there was some health concerns about how much of a damage he's accrued over time over the last year, too. So it's not as comfortable, but I think going back to 145, I think the weight cut is what bothers, like, your conscience. When you think about it, you're like, I don't know if I want to see him do that. But he's never, as far as I know, he's never missed weight, right?
Who?
Holloway?
Holloway?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe
think
so.
he's ever missed weight. So he's been very,
Well, the one
professional.
about the 6 days to fight Nurmagomedov.
Yes, that's true.
But
And
that was
the
such a
commission
weird
kind of-
circumstance.
And he didn't even get to weigh in.
Yeah,
They
So
pulled
we
the
don't
plug.
want to, but he can go back there, and at least in the short term, and they have everything still intact. So it's got to be the natural move.
All right, fair enough. Let's transition very quickly to the next step for the co-main event. I want to talk about Gastelum in a second, but that main event, I went back and I've watched it a number of times now. Boy, that is a special fight. And that fifth round gut check moment, it really reminded me a bit of the, I know they hate each other, but the John Jones-Gustafsson 1 fight, when John Jones came out in that fifth round and let him know what time it was. Wow, dude, that's what champions are made of. And he didn't get that title by accident. I think he woke up a lot of people. Here's what I kind of want to focus on very quickly if we can. This is a fight that is tailor-made for the Oceanic region. And I think there's something special we need to say about it. You know, for example, I like to cheer for Real Madrid. A lot of people don't understand why. The basic idea is that, look, I had to pick a team in Europe, and I fell in love with the city. And if you fall in love with the city, there is, of course, the other team, and they're a very good team. But the reality is the kings of that city are the one and all white. And I just kind of was enamored by it, to be quite candid with you. But the reality is it's a Madrid team, it's a Spanish team, but it's a global entity, man. And everyone gets to enjoy it on different levels. What I love about Adesanya versus Whitaker is that's an oceanic fight. That is Australia versus New Zealand, or however you want to pitch it. That is their native sons against one another. And yet it's the worlds as well. And there's something kind of interesting about that. We don't get a lot of Polish versus Polish or French versus French, that also dominates our attention generally. I don't know exactly what that says about the sport, Chuck, but I think it is a significant moment.
I agree with you 100%. There's very few fights you can put together of people who are not North American or Brazilian or, like there's some kind of American in the mix or Canadian, you know what
Western
I mean?
Hemisphere.
Exactly. So to have those two guys and for it to mean as vitally what it means to Australia and New Zealand to be as vital to us here is a big deal. And it's, we've watched Australia kind of struggle to get recognition, essentially. There's been multiple guys who've come and went. And now you've got a couple of guys who are right there, who have that kind of transcendent power. And I feel like that's cool. I mean, it's been fun to watch. I remember George Sotiropoulos, guys like that. They've been hammering away.
Elvis Sinisek.
I know, exactly. These guys have been, and there's so many schools and everything. It's cool to see a market that was dedicated to mixed martial arts actually succeed. Right. And get to this point and for it to matter. Yes, to mature and become to this point where we all care about it too. So I agree with you 100%. I hope they do it down there. And what a fight, man. After watching Adesanya's performance, and that was the revelation to me, was just how big he's willing, how big he can dig deep into himself to come up with that kind of performance after taking as many licks as it. Because remember, the John Jones revelation was we never seen him get hit, really.
Right.
We didn't know if he could take a punch. So the Gustafsson fight was the revelation in that sense. His chin was better. And then we saw that 5th round, and we thought, oh my God, there's way more to him than we realized. I felt like that's what happened with Adesanya. And then you put that against Bobby Knuckles, man, and it becomes a whole.
And that's critically, pound for pound wise, it's one of the better fights you can make in the entire sport. And you brought out a good thing internationally, Oceanic, Super Bowl, and all that. But let's not forget that Adesanya is such a unique international star and a potential to be a global sensation because he also has the African connection.
That's right.
Coming from Nigeria and joining up with Kamaru Usman being the first African champions.
Sadiq Youssef, too.
Said in the aftermath they both want to bring the championships back there and celebrate. So you have a guy that markets to all different areas. Reminds fans of sort of a John Jones Anderson Silva hybrid mix. He's got the flashy skills that you want. He's got the flashy mouth that you would want. And then on top of that, he's got the backbone. On top of that, look, I love the flashy guy like Luke Rockhold on the rise. Luke Rockhold gets knocked out by Kelvin Gastelum Saturday night because Gastelum gave a world-class A++ performance. And I make that comparison because we've seen guys like this before. They look great, but this is a heartbreaking sport. It's a brutal sport, and you can look great and go really deep into that deep end and still get suffocated. And the fact that Adesanya was the last man standing in that fight, just like he's everything they need. And that doesn't mean he's not going to come out and lose to Robert Whittaker, by the way, who's fantastic.
Awesome.
But at this point, he shows you everything
that version of Kelvin Gastelum was hell-bent on not losing that fight.
Dude, that was an eye-opener for me.
know.
I came out of that fight being like, I have misunderstood Kelvin Gastelum.
100%. Yeah. And for Adesanya to actually withstand it and win. And it communicated itself very well. You could see that Gastelum was in that. He was going to go out. He was going to go out like that. And you could see that Adesanya had to actually raise above that and to beat him. Just crazy, man.
And by the way, for anyone that didn't think that was in the top 5 or 6 or 7 fight of all time, remember in the 5th round, those 2 submission attempts Gastelum miraculously reversed out of them? Those were moments that take a great fight and just elevate it to like other ones.
I feel like something that's not being mentioned enough. The champion, Robert Whittaker, has been gut checked as well. Let's not forget about that Yoel Romero fight. Both Yoel Romero fights.
100%.
That fight is not only a great fight on paper, skills-wise, but heart-wise, man, we could see one of the greatest title fights ever. Because Robert Whittaker is also that guy.
Part of the reason
he also embraces the darkness.
Part of the reason why Whittaker's out, this is not entirely the reason, it's a little bit different now, but there have been moments where he has been had to sit out of the sport because the wars with Romero were so hard on him. He came out of there so battered that he needed time to be off. Now, what's interesting is Whittaker and Adesanya are not too far apart in age. You're talking about how he crosses different sort of geographic boundaries. He crosses, obviously, racial ones as well, but more than that, generational ones. He's up there talking about Magna, whatever it is, Manga. Now, I think, I wouldn't say it's to Israel's face, but I think it's for dorks. But the point being is, it speaks to a certain generation as well. Now, Whittaker's the same age, but I think he guards his personality more.
Yeah.
Israel is just, it's not really a contrast in geography and everything else. It's a contrast in personality. It's the closed door versus the open door. It's a special fight, man.
Major accessibility right now too. Like whoever wants to talk to him, he's willing to talk. Conor McGregor was very similar back in the early days. Like it just seemed like any publicity was good. He's going to talk to whoever. He's going to, if there was a camera on him, he was going to say something. You know what I mean? He was. Well,
did you hear Dana after the fight saying Adesanya's on a McGregor-like trajectory right now? I mean, he doesn't really throw that around that often for as much hyperbole as he throws out.
Brian, what am I saying? Danny, how about this part? We've been heaping all this praise on all these guys, and I can't wait for that fight, whenever that's going to be. What about Kelvin Gastelum? Where does he go from here?
I mean, definitely take a break. I mean, those fights.
Those are hard fights.
Those are hard fights that can take, years out of you, right?
Plus 2 training camps, right? Like
Right.
basically
Two training camps back to back, and going into it, he made it clear, like, I'm kind of tired. This has been a little rough. It's been a rough road. Definitely take some time off, and look, we know the sport changes a lot. See how the division looks around November. Maybe it's completely different, but I think he's up there in the top 5. I mean, you give him a fight or 2, depending on who he beats and how he looks, he's right back up there. And giving the exciting fight that he put on against Adesanya, bro, I'm excited to see him against anybody.
You call me Bro Shelby right here. Give him Chris Weidman, the guy he just lost to, the only loss he had during that run. Sort of an aging name, a guy maybe can beat coming off of a loss. That's great matchmaking.
I think if the timeline aligns, if Jared Cannonier gets past Anderson Silva, that could be a good fight as well. There's some, interesting options.
Can I take one more second and just celebrate what Whitaker Adesanya could be? I just sat here and told you Adesanya proved that he's the next big global star, and he's the real. He went into the deep end, and he was the guy that came out. And I wouldn't favor him gun to my head against Whitaker. That shows you how great that fight is.
Yeah, it's even with all Whitaker's time off too. Yeah. Like I think the betting odds are out. I think Adesanya for the first time ever is an underdog.
Yeah,
slight.
That makes sense.
Slight. But I would say you guys know how much I love Adesanya's game. I think it's next level. On the other hand, I think it's appropriate that Whitaker is the deserved betting favorite. So really, what a weekend UFC 236 was. And there were other people like we're talking about Dustin Poirier getting drowned out. Poor Khalil Roundtree has like the performance of his career, and no one's talking about it. Not because it wasn't special, just because the other stuff was historic, literally historic. So pretty amazing. All right, that takes us to. Oh wait, one more thing before we give up on this. The ESPN Plus stuff. Okay, how did you? So you were there, so you don't count. How did you watch?
Through my computer.
Okay, how did you watch?
Same thing, yeah.
So I did too.
I wasn't at home, so
now, here was how I got it. I followed the instructions exactly. I got on my computer, got on the browser, I ordered it. I had to sign in inside out a bunch of times, which was very annoying. Nevertheless, ESPN, once it populated on my screen, it was perfect. Now, we said this before, the ESPN Plus interface is garbage. I cannot overstate that.
Back that.
You pause it and you wait 30 minutes, it just jumps 30 minutes. It doesn't hold the action at all. You can't review it. You can't go forward or backward 15 seconds. You can't put it, like, it's one thing to not be as good as like YouTube TV, which is backed by the technology of Google. You're not even as good as Fight Pass. Like you're very.
Fight Pass is pretty.
Fight Pass is pretty. Okay, I'm not saying Fight Pass is bad. I'm saying it's not a huge scale operation relative to what ESPN has from a resource standpoint. Their interface is so terrible. However, once it populated, it was crisp. Mine didn't buffer. Did we have any problems along the way?
Mine was fine.
I had multiple times where it did buffer. Like it was just all of a sudden something's going on. You're waiting like 5 seconds.
Were you on Wi-Fi?
I was. Yeah. So I had a hard probably
line.
It was probably more to do with that. But it is something now you have to consider.
What did you hear from fans and other observers about their pay-per-view experience?
I think the biggest concern that fans had is that there's a lot of people in the Midwest or certain rural areas that don't have the greatest internet connection, and now that's the only way to get pay-per-view. So it's either they have to go to a bar or something, and not everybody wants to do that and be up till 2 a.m. or 1:30 a.m. at a bar.
Donks. Oh my God.
So I mean, it's definitely a tough experience. I mean, we live in I live in New York City, so it's very easy to get, very good internet. But that's not the case for everyone.
I thought about that. You know what my thought on that is? I think ESPN probably decided, number one, eventually broadband will be more accessible. And number two, okay, we can't, I don't want to speak for them, but here's my hunch. My hunch is that they were like, all right, we can't service certain remote areas. Oh, well. Yeah. They'll get it when they get it. How much does that really,
I think that's true.
Hold on, how much does that really cut into their bottom line? If you lost New York City, that would be devastating. Yeah. Right. If you lost Huntsville, Alabama.
I was just going to make Huntsville. I was going to say in the 90s, that's 90% of your business.
I don't think, all respect to Huntsville, Alabama, I don't think it's cutting into your business that much. Right. And I think they're just like, okay, all right, fine, whatever. The ratings came out for the prelims, not money. About 900,000.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
900. The previous ones are like 1.4.
Wow.
Part of it is I think a lot of people still don't know who Adesanya and Gastelum and they know who Max is, but they didn't know who Poirier is.
It wasn't great prelims, to be honest. There wasn't a
not great prelims. Do you read much into that about what it means for pay-per-view or the UFC generally?
I think so, because I mean the prelims weren't stacked, and if you look at the main card. Besides the two main fights, the other fights weren't as big as, for example, like, the last pay-per-view, we had Robbie Lawler and Ben Askren, not non-title fight, just in the main card chilling. You know, that's a huge fight. So we probably won't know the numbers. Maybe. I don't know if they'll come out, but my guess is, you know, they probably reflect what the prelims did. You know,
Depressed to some degree.
Yep.
Last thing on this, we've all seen the Jones and Adesanya stuff. You talked about it on my show on Monday, others as well. And now Anderson Silva has thrown his hat into the mix about this. Is this just petty rivalry? Like, why is everyone kind of picking on Adesanya? I realize he was asked by TMZ, and he said, well, I beat one goat, I'm hunting another one. Okay. But the strong reaction to it, that's the part that's like, fighters say things about each other all the time.
Yeah.
To focus in on that. And then for now, Guilherme Cruz talking to Anderson Silva on what, yesterday or 2 days ago, and Anderson being like, well, he was disrespectful. Is that just Silva and John being friends and then getting on the action?
I think so, because I hadn't looked the TMC interview until yesterday, and I looked at the TMC interview, and yes, he said like, oh, I killed one goat, I'm going to hunt for another one. But the way he said it and the things he said prior to that, if you look at the whole interview, it was still very friendly. The TMZ guy was like, you know, John Jones said, you know, he probably sees a fight with you down the line. And he's like, okay, yeah, great minds think alike. Yeah, I see that too. You know, he was very complimentary in a way.
Called him a goat.
Yeah.
I mean,
but we also have John Jones, who's super competitive. I mean, Chuck Liddell, who's not even in his sphere, remember?
Yeah,
said something about him, and he was going after him.
Here's plenty of dudes. Why do we respect John Jones?
I'm not trying to call out Jones's heart, but I'm offering this as a possibility. Jones talking trash with Liddell, he's 40-something years old. It's a winnable fight. Jones talking trash with a smaller middleweight, Adesanya,
of course.
winnable fight. I want John Jones to go to heavyweight more than anything for business and challenge legacy purposes. Does John Jones potentially not want to go to heavyweight right now? So this is another reason.
is that your read on this?
Here's another reason to link his name.
That did occur to me. I will say that.
That did not occur to me.
To build the road toward another big star in a very winnable fight that would draw big pay-per-views. Does he not want DC at heavyweight? Does he not want Stipe? Does he not want that challenge and that smoke? I'm just asking it. John has always wanted to fight the best.
Why did you think that too?
I mean, because it was out of left field. We've talked about him, we've talked about him in heavyweight scenarios before, and in DC, obviously, where would they fight if they fight again, that sort of thing. So for him to say like, hey, the middleweight guy, you want to do this? You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a.
Not only the middleweight guy, the guy who makes middleweight at 183.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Easily makes it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big problem for me is John Jones is huge.
Yeah,
he's a large man. Yes.
And so you're like, you want to fight. I mean, it would be compelling because they're both very good fighters. But I'm not sure. It seemed out of left field. That's all.
I also think like it might be something down the line. John Jones is a smart guy. He's planting seeds.
Sure.
Who knows where Israel Adesanya is 2 years down the line?
He's being smart to plug himself into. He's probably learned some stuff from his time away because he's plugging himself into almost every scenario now. You notice that?
Yeah.
He knows like Conor McGregor did
a Conor bit. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now John Jones is doing that, and you got everybody chirping about John Jones. It's smart, man.
And it's also raising Adesanya's profile too.
Yeah,
you know, to have these big names going after you like
I
that.
will say that Anderson Silva's comments. Now I didn't see the actual interview. I just read the piece where they always seem so out of touch to me. I'm like, where is it? Like I know they're saying, well, he's kind of a traditionalist. You know, he likes the respect of the game and all this. And I'm like, dude, you fought like Chael Sonnen. That's where it was born. Was when he was coming at you, and you know what I mean. Like the disrespect is what basically became a thing through that rivalry. And I'm like, you don't understand how this works. He seems so out of touch with, and especially like
he's 43.
with John Jones, especially. It's like, oh, how do you expect all the good things he's done in the sport? I'm sitting there reading that like, dude, have you paid any attention to what John Jones has been doing over the last few years? That seems so
maybe he's
bizarrely
oblivious
out
to it,
there.
yeah.
What's that?
Maybe he doesn't know. You know,
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not on Twitter.
He's not on Twitter.
Guess
yeah.
not.
Really on Twitter.
He has a lot of kids. So
By the way, did you
probably
notice
busy.
company man Conor McGregor's tweets over the weekend? Just weird. I know, like,
I don't follow him.
good Lord. I know, and Dana said at the press conference on Saturday that he did come out and tell those guys, meaning Habib and Conor, stop the madness, stop starting religious and race wars on Twitter. But to see Conor be like, I have respect for everybody. Great performance, Dustin and Max. It's just like, can you find that?
What would you prefer? Like, here's the thing. He's allowed to tweet whatever he wants. Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying is, forget about the anti-Islamic stuff or whatever, but like just tweeting about the fights, what's wrong with that?
When he tweeted
Laying
about
it
the
on
fights
thick.
the last 6 months and sort of was like, I'd love to fight that guy, great performance, it's fine, but this was very thick, almost reactionary. Like,
Yeah, I
oh,
think
you want me to be a company player? I'll do it.
Both
it
these,
seemed like it was
all
like
these guys who are like big stars, and there's no bigger star than McGregor, they often see themselves above the fray. Like, I see the peasants the peasants below me in their with their bread and circus. Let me clap on their. But like, whatever. He's allowed to tweet whatever he wants. I just don't pay a lot of mind to it. The thing about it is, someone was asking me like the other day, like, why didn't you talk about one of these tweets on one of your shows? And I'm like, I got 15 hours to kill. I could easily just fill it up with McGregor tweets, but.
You make a whole segment out of it.
I can make a show out of it, bro. That's how much I can stretch that out.
tweets.
But the point is, do y'all really want to hear that as an audience? I don't think people do.
Maybe just on Tuesdays.
Huh?
No, I'm kidding. So maybe on Tuesdays.
Yeah, right. When I'm really dying for it. Especially on a weekend where there's UFC St. Petersburg. I do not have much to say about this card, but it is happening, so we do have to acknowledge it. Let's start with the main event, Danny. And there's not much beyond that, but there are a couple of gems on this card. Have you looked at the card recently?
A little bit, yeah.
I read through it yesterday. It's a bunch of Chevs and, you know what I'm saying? Shevchenko and Avchak, Mev, and it's a bunch of names you haven't heard of. Now, I'm not
Usually
saying
the guys you stay away from in a fight game, if they have the OBS and Evs on their name, you don't want anything.
Yeah.
A lot of dead Wikipedia links, too.
Yeah, a lot of dead Wikipedia links, but with dudes with some tough-ass names. That's what it is. So I'm not saying it's going to be good or bad, although I conspicuously, you don't see you never know how good a fight's going to be until it happens, which is true, but you also have to get me to watch it by having a list of names that I care to see. Anyway, neither here nor there. Okay, let's talk about the main event. There are some names that I want to see. Alexei Oleinik is back.
Yes.
Basically after the best win of his career, taking on Alistair Overeem, who we spoke to recently on MMA Hour, and he's been, of course, in a million other places too. He's a big name. He still has championship ambitions. I guess what I'm wondering is, what does this fight do for him in that regard?
I don't think much as far as getting him super close to a title because, Oleinik, although he is coming off a nice win over Mark Hunt, he's not someone that we're revered as, championship material and has been, in championship status or contention for a long time. I mean, he's just starting to knock on that door. So, he got a win before that, right? And then before that, he had the Curtis Blades loss. So, he puts him on.
That was a knockout against Ngannou.
Puts him on a 2-fight win streak, which is definitely nice, and it's definitely a base and something to build upon. But I wouldn't say he'd be knocking on the title on it. But it definitely puts him in a good situation. And look, it's a main event fight.
It was supposed to be Volkov, right? It was
right.
So that would
have been
a switch. So I feel like that would have actually probably placed him a little.
That would have been much better.
So it's kind of unfortunate for him that he has this fight, which is kind of a showcase out there. Volkov was, in St. Petersburg, it's going to be this one thing. Now it's become something else. But
they're just using his name. This is a stay busy.
Yeah,
Don't forget, he made Stipe tap that time, according to a lot of.
Oh, Jose, what is it?
I want to remind you of that. Yeah, in Cleveland.
Campbell, what is your sense about what this fight is?
This is just an old name on a main event of a bad card that's really not for us in the States. It's for Russia and Russian fans. Obviously, we get access to it 1 p.m. in the afternoon, I think, is the main card start on the Damn Plus. But it does nothing. It's just if you win, look, in the heavyweight division, you're always relevant.
Really does nothing?
It does something. A win's a win.
It does almost nothing.
2-fight win streak.
It does more than a loss. It does nothing more than not fighting at all. And
and also he's headlining a UFC card. In some favors, you said it, it's a name.
You want the truth, don't you?
I mean, here's Brian Campbell over there being like, "This guy's in a UFC main event," and his response is, "You might as well just be mowing his yard. There's nothing more than that."
They're giving him main event money. He's giving them his name. That's
exactly. I mean, ultimately, what basically you're saying, it's a favor for the company, right? And if you're in good business with the UFC, I mean, they might give
you a favor when you're old and you're not in title contention. You either fight other old guys or do main event cards.
How can you make a claim? I'm not saying he is in title contention. What I'm saying is, how at heavyweight can you say he's ever far from it?
There's always the disclaimer that's there, and you're right. But heavyweight's got a bottleneck on it right now. He doesn't seem to have a title contending chin at the moment. He's at the tail end of his career. Yes, Arlovsky just went on a run. It happens. You get what I'm saying here. But I am not afraid to bring truth to this chair, just so you know.
That's why we have you here.
These European shows or those type of things, at least there's still a platform for something emphatic to happen because you do get that day is basically centered on
Wouldn't this be more Asian if it's Russian? It's a weird.
Well, true.
Yeah, yes. It's a weird. Okay, go ahead.
I feel like the real winner here could be Oleinik.
Helsinki.
I know.
But I feel like the real winner could be Oleinik here. If he wins, dude, Mark Hunt, Alistair Overeem, all of a sudden he's probably closer to.
It's fun in the sense like it reminds me of the old Verdum versus Overeem back in the day when they were fighting the Strikeforce Grand Prix because if it goes to the ground, we've got a whole different situation. If it remains standing, I love those kind of stylistic things. Who's going to be able to do what? And obviously, Oleinik has some pretty fun submissions. It's a fun matchup. I don't know, like
we've already given too much time to it.
I will say this though. people have made the most of these types of things. Masvidal and Till, for instance, that was a
bigger.
good fight.
That was bigger.
Of course, a big fight, but the fact that it was the only fight, it's the main event of a UFC, and it's under this, right now in our day and age when everybody's kind of paying attention to it peripherally at least, it's just, you have a chance. It's always going to be meaningful in the sense that it'll be more visible than maybe it used to be.
Well, here's the thing. What does it do for Olynyk if he wins? What does it do for Alistair if he loses? Because this whole conversation has been predicated on Overeem just sort of steamrolling.
I feel like it would be very detrimental for Alistair Overeem.
Overeem's contention days are done.
It was going to be done.
No, because Campbell was saying it does nothing.
I don't think it does much bad for him if he loses. Obviously, he goes a step down in wherever he is in the holding area of veteran title contender if we need him and somebody else gets hurt and somebody else falls out. But you're still in that same pool. That pool's washy, and that's where he is, and it's fine. It's great. You can make old guys celebrity money. Rich Franklin made the second half of his career off of just staying active. We got Wanderlei for you in China. I'm there. That's what you do right now. He's not necessarily in contention or falls out with a loss.
No, but with a loss would definitely hurt him.
Right.
A loss would definitely hurt him because right now Alistair Overeem still has a big name. If he strings another win after this one, let's say he gets past Olynyk, all of a sudden you could be possibly putting Alistair Overeem in that conversation. Now, if he loses, man, especially with the talent that's at heavyweight now, you can almost forget about the title in a way. I mean, you never know. Crazier things have happened, but at 38, man, that's a tough ask.
You know what I love about Brian's analysis? Because Brian has a real different perspective than all of us. Because he is jaded from years of boxing coverage. You've got a real cynical...
I was going to say gas station food.
That too, but the fatalist boxing side of you. Well, no, it's important because in MMA, everyone's a little bit chipper about the upside of things all the time, including journalists and media members.
It does tend optimistic.
Brian walks in and goes, washed, dead, washed. And you don't really see that a lot in MMA media. I don't agree a lot, but I really respect that from
Typically, though,
Thank you.
Typically, though, guys like Overeem... History has proven that they're not out of it.
Yeah.
In the heavyweight division. We've seen guys like Arlovsky and Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt had like a 6-7 record before he went on his run. So and he was old. He was as old as Overeem is.
Also on that card, Islam Makhachev is going to be on it. Antonina, I always get her name wrong. Antonina Shevchenko fighting Roxanne Modafferi.
That's going to be a good fight.
That's actually a really
I like how we always get the
fight.
synchronized workout.
That's it. And also, here's what's interesting about that. On the ground, Modafferi is light years ahead of Shevchenko. But Modafferi had a piece on Bloody Elbow this week talking about how actual, real physicality has been her downfall. Shevchenko, do you guys remember her run, Antonina, on Dana White, the Contender Series? In the clinch, she was mobbing these women. She is very strong, very powerful. So it's an interesting fight, actually. I really am very curious to see how that one goes down. And then there's a bunch of donks you never heard of. Let me quickly go through this, if I may. No, I'm not even lying. It's like I do this for a living, and I haven't heard of half these people.
Yeah.
Here we go. UFC St. Petersburg. I'm going to do this on the air. I'm sure our boss Brian is loving this. This is just the creme de la
Slide
creme.
in some DMs while you're there.
Here we go. Here's your co-main. Islam Makhachev taking on Armen Saryukian. Sergey Pavlovich, who actually is a decent heavyweight prospect who lost, I believe, to Overeem, taking on Marcelo Golm. Ivan Shirkatov taking on Devin Clark. Again, Modafferi Shevchenko. Christoph Jotko is back against Alan Amendovsky, and there's a bunch of other ones as well. So there you go. That'll be on Saturday if you want to see that, I guess. Okay, one of you mentioned Rich Franklin. Let's get to him. He gets inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. I believe in the Pioneer Wing, which would be the most deserving one. Chuck, you like narratives. I'll start with you.
Sure. You like hats.
I was around. I'm old enough to remember when people said Rich Franklin was going to maul Anderson Silva.
Of course, I remember this too.
I remember this very distinctly, and I remember the hushed tones in the bar. That's back when I was watching MMA in bars.
I watched both those fights in bars.
I remember everyone. I'll never forget where I was at. I was at a Hooters in Richmond, Virginia. Shocker. And I'll never forget, everyone was like, Rich. And he goes in there, and I'm sorry, he got bodied, right? He got bodied.
I was in Fargo, North Dakota at a bar.
Wow, dude.
Wow.
Okay, and I remember everyone, it was like a funeral up in there.
Yeah.
No one saw it coming. And then you look now, and you're like, how could people have not seen it coming? Trust me, no one saw that coming at the time.
Well, it became Anderson Silva's kind of coming out party, right, to beat him in the way he did. Because I think we all had, he was a pioneer in that sense.
Yeah.
He was right at the cusp of that boom period when it was, there was like 5 names and you would know him. Rich Franklin was one of them, Neapolitan, with shorts and all that stuff. I mean, he was the guy who you knew.
The
he was
math
a school
teacher.
He looked
well,
like Jim Carrey, it's like, but you look at him fight, man, look at his nose, it's a little crooked, he's crazy, that sort of thing. I loved him. He was very articulate. He was one of the first guys, I think,
Friendly.
who was, very friendly, but he could explain the fight game in ways that people didn't really know. Before George St. Pierre even was articulating kind of that we're not a bunch of madmen, he was doing it. And I felt like that's one of his big contributions.
He was the first guy who took a truly scientific approach
100%.
to training.
And then he had a couple of crazy knockouts. They still use that on that Bob O'Reilly thing. They still have that. They still have that Nate Quarry one front and center, and
Which is not even which is one of his good performances, but I thought the Evan Tanner win should have been a lot better. Yeah,
That's a defining win.
But the Pioneer wing, the Pioneer wing is absolutely right. He was one of those guys, the original guys, who was really bringing it through right when everybody started to get the curiosity got to a pitch, and I felt like he was right there to kind of explain it and help those people through.
So let me follow up, if I may. We're worked on the table. What is the story of his career? I'm not asking why he's in the Hall of Fame, although that if you answer it, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But what does he mean to MMA?
An original champion, man. He was one of the original guys who was going around with that belt, and I think when you saw him, like, that's the way I see him. He's just one of those guys. Like Matt Hughes had a little bit of that vibe. There's other guys like that, but Franklin, to me, I think it's because of the weight class. It got a little bit more of and I agree with you. He was just people loved him. The people who were into it, they really loved him. So he was just kind of like the original champion. And that meaning like a champion for the sport as well, because I felt like he did a great job of that, just kind of turning people onto it. So that's where he's at in my mind. And then later, obviously, he was that guy. He was kind of a company man more than anything. Like, he would just step up, fight any weight, do whatever they asked of him. And again, that was sort of admirable, because so many times he would just, hey, we need somebody. Rich, are you available? And he would just jump in and fight a guy, you know?
He also happens to be a great all-time fighter, but I think the bigger legacy is right champion, right time at a point when the sport and the promotion was trying to go back to the pay-per-view level and compete with boxing, and they had an accessible guy to the fans who you could pitch as easy to talk. He's a teacher by day before this. We could do documentaries on him and show him he's a great husband. He's this nice guy during a time when they were basically saying, hey, look at boxing. They're all a bunch of rejects who would be, harming on the street if they weren't in the sport. We have college graduates. We have regular Joes. And I think that made that was a big part in making the sport more accessible to people.
Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with these two. Like, it was the UFC needed Rich Franklin at that time, because
You were a teenager when he was.
yeah, I remember that was around the time I started tuning in, because I remember Anderson Silva's Rice. I remember his debut against Chris Lieben, right? So I remember those Rich Franklin fights, and I was telling my brother, I'm like, yo, Rich Franklin's gonna, beat him. Yeah. Even in the rematch, I'm like, nah, he's still got it.
It had a sense of a fluke to people who really
it's
loved
because we weren't introduced.
One.
The thing is that, at least for me, that was around the first time I started seeing the clinch. And like the Muay Thai clinch. Any other than that, like any other fights, we didn't really see the Muay Thai clinch. And you're like, wait,
you did not to that degree.
Not to that degree. My whole thing was like, wait, Rich, you can just move your head out and then you're good, right? But no, that's not how it works, man.
And Danny met the plum. Yeah, definitely.
So,
did you friend him on MySpace?
What's up?
Franklin back
No. I did have a MySpace, but no, I didn't friend him. So that was a time where like the UFC needed to kind of get away from like, look, these guys are, because I remember when he was fighting, I don't think the UFC even had branded gloves.
No.
So it was a time where they were stepping away from the, one night tournaments, this barbaric thing. And look, we have this guy that has, a master's. We have this guy that's super intelligent and articulate. People don't remember as well, but he was also like Mr. Reliable. Like, you could plug him in at any main event, any co-main event. And he was also interesting because when he lost the title, that was around the time where the UFC light heavyweight division was at its best, the golden era, the Rampage, right? Forrest Griffin, all those guys were up there. And all of a sudden, he started going up and having interesting fights, the Forrest Griffin, Vanderlei Silva. And then he kind of added...
Dan Henderson fight was good too.
Dan Henderson. He added a new layer where you're like, oh, what happens if we plug him in here? And it was pretty exciting as well. He also coached the Ultimate Fighter 1, which gave a huge boom to the
leading
sport.
To the Shamrock.
Against Ken Shamrock.
And he didn't. No, one was Couture and Liddell.
That's
he
right.
coached
That's right. 4
opposite Matt Hughes, because I have the T-shirt. I wore it actually on the earlier this week.
He also replaced Tito Ortiz when he was going
Did you
against
have
Chuck Liddell.
anything from his American Fighter line pre-beard?
No, nor was I at the Creation Museum when he did the ribbon cutting ceremony, which is an actual thing he did.
Wow.
You guys, he's like super into that, like creation science, which is not actual science. But
Speaking of beards, when was the last time you were clean shaven?
2009, June 2009. It's a long story how I know that. But
We could do a whole show.
Here is all the things you guys said about Rich Franklin are important. I would add one more detail, which is, for me, we often ask these guys what they're fighting for, and they try to come up with answers for us. And sometimes I don't even like, because if you're out of title contention, why are you still fighting? Because here's the thing. Rich Franklin competed at a time where literally not only the best guy in his weight class was competing, but maybe the best guy ever was competing, and he just got iced out. And I'm telling you, there was this narrative about Franklin before the Silva fight, and it completely changed after the first one, then especially the second one. People were like, well, they even called it Rich Franklin territory. You're in this you're Uriah Faber when there's Jose Aldo around. You're in Rich Franklin territory. But the thing about Rich that I don't think gets talked about enough is that it never seemed to dawn on him that should affect how he took fights or fought in them. I remember he just kept fighting. Like, look at his resume. Is it the best resume ever in MMA? No, obviously it's damn good.
Yeah.
But that dude fought the best fighters of his generation.
He fought Dan Henderson at that time.
Every time, dude. Every
One
time.
fight with Kung Lee, it was like one big name after
And he never had a quitter's mentality. I remember the Travis Lutter fight. I remember he got taken down past. Lutter sat for the armbar, and he immediately hit the hitchhiker escape, got on top, and then pounded him out. It's like this dude never lost his zest for the game. People ask why people compete. Dude, because he wanted to compete. It's a tautology, but it's the reality. He just loved to be out there and do that kind of thing. I'm sure he would have preferred the bigger checks and the belt around his waist, but that wasn't going to stop him. It's a lesson in being an adult. It's a lesson in perseverance. It's a lesson in pursuing that which you love, even if it doesn't love you back the way it's supposed to. I don't know. I found something quite like, I don't know, what Seneca in it a little bit. Like there's a little bit of just stoicism and resilience in the whole thing. And it really is kind of impressive about Rich Franklin.
You watch his reality show by any chance? The one he does on YouTube with one? No?
Bro, I read books. Come on, man. I'm not watching.
I didn't just ask you.
I like Rich Franklin.
I don't know, but
I'm not watching one reality show. I'm not watching one, much less
I
one
interviewed
reality
about
show.
it. It's supposed to be a mixture of The Ultimate Fighter and like The Amazing Race, and there's competition. I don't know,
Look,
whatever.
I'm not making a comment about whether it's good or it's not. I have no idea, but no, I do not watch it. But, then there's the other part. Then Rich's career as a fighter ends. He actually, folks may not know this, he actually went and sought permission from the UFC. Not permission exactly, but like their blessing, to go work at one, and has worked at one, I'm sure, in some kind of really helpful capacity because he's still around. And everybody in MMA, if you hang around long enough, you piss somebody off. Who's mad at Rich Franklin?
No, not
Nobody.
Remember he was doing like juice? Like he was making juice?
Zealand was the name of the juicer. Zealand.
That's right,
yeah.
I forgot about that. I remember when he was big into that.
I don't think that did well.
He's not afraid to try new things, I'll tell him that.
Should have tried the other juice. Would have had a longer.
But that's my point. Like, I'm not saying he was some kind of like adventurous jump off a cliff Travis Pastrana risk taker, but he never let downsides of things deter him ultimately, right?
He's an ultimate fighter.
God, get the F out. Will you please? Oh, my God. Dave Coulier here. Cut it out. All right. God, where do we go from here? Jesus Christ. All right. Couple of things. Very quickly, let's go through some news and notes here before Under the Radar. We have time for it. Leslie Smith, Danny, signed with Bellator. She's going to be a featherweight. Here's my question about this. First of all, I'm very happy about it. I think it's a great signing. I thought when she got cut, remember, she got cut at UFC Atlantic City. Barboza versus Lee, right?
Yep.
That's a little while ago. She's only now signed? What took so long?
I have no idea, but I think it's a great signing. I mean, also she had, the way she was cut, it wasn't because she lost the fight, right? She didn't even fight.
She didn't even fight.
So, I believe she was, filing a lawsuit against the UFC for that, or she was looking into pursuing
a
legal
labor
action,
claim,
labor claim. So that might have, taken up her time. Also, she's working with Project Spearhead, or I don't know if she still is at whatever capacity, but she was big into that as well. So she had her hands full. But now that she signed with Bellator, I think it's a great signing. It's not like the names that we're used to seeing, like these huge names, legends. But nonetheless, I think it brings a little bit of legitimacy to Bellator in the sense of like, look, she stood up for all the fighters, and she was so transparent with the media, with the fighters. It almost felt like she was always like, advocating for the right things. If you just
certainly
look at her
fighter, right? Like, but it's like she's more symbolic at this point.
Yes. So I mean, if you have her in your company and she's happy with you, I think that says a lot about your company and your promotion. I think that's something good.
What's the story here?
I can't have a comment on everything, but I will say, is this
What?
another fighter who went union against UFC? And
You do not know who Leslie Smith is?
I know who she is. I mean, Danny covered it. I don't have a deep take on Leslie Smith. Good for her.
Well, okay, so then let me pitch it to you there, stage one. Stage two would be, is Bellator courting somebody who is going to put an emphasis on their labor practices? Because while I can see Bellator being able to pitch this as, hey, we're the fighters organization, you're not which is true. Like, you see a lot of people go there and be like, oh my God, I got treated very differently.
Yeah.
And some people complain about their treatment at Bellator, but okay, you get the idea. However, they don't have a union there either. It's all the same issues. So are they a little bit, I don't know if courting disaster is the right word, but are they going to bring attention on themselves that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily need
Probably not, because they're so fighter friendly and they've proved that. They allow you to get your own fighter
Sponsors.
sponsorships, things
yeah.
like that, make the decision making a lot better for you in terms of you talk to anybody that signed Rory and all those guys. It's just so much better. It just seems like a natural fit. I don't necessarily think it's gonna lead to Norma Ray type stuff.
What do you think, Chuck?
I mean, it's not like a Colin Kaepernick situation where it's one of those, where nobody wants
Wait till she starts kneeling.
That's what the weird the weird thing is, though. There is a little bit of like when you see her name, regardless of what it's attached to at this point, you can't help but think it's a little bit polarizing in the sense of, the UFC, what she's done with the UFC, and you can admire it or you can think that she's a rabble rouser, however you want to look at it. That's who she is at this point. And I think that I think it's wait and see. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I wouldn't be surprised if she gets along with Bellator and it's all good, and we don't even ever hear anything about any of that stuff. But I equally wouldn't be surprised if for some reason Bellator is in her crosshairs and she wants to better. She has a sense of mission to her.
She has said even with the UFC, you don't have to hate the UFC to want better.
Yeah, it's the same
situation.
sport, right? I mean, it's just so I don't expect her convictions to go away because she's with Bellator.
By the way, I don't know how much, you should be careful about this. I don't know how much her stock has risen as a popular figure, but as a visible one, I mean, she was out there for presidential candidate Andrew Yang. He did a rally in San Francisco. She gave the opening message for it. She was on the show with Samantha Bee and
Did like a talk at Rutgers or something like that. Like
she kind of has gotten her name out a little bit here. I wonder if to some degree if and I wouldn't blame them if they were. Bellator cashing in on that a little bit. There could be something to that. Because she's still going to be, here's the other part about it. What if she signs with Bellator, Bellator treats her well, and then she still goes after the UFC? Bellator is like, hey, we're happy to give her a platform. You wonder about that too.
Wow. They certainly have a little bit of a heel vibe like that. So I wouldn't put it past them.
This idea that they just did it to buttress their women's featherweight division,
no,
I don't
there's
buy
always
that.
more
That's
to
a fair
it,
conspiracy theory. I like when you get a little.
I like being a little conspiratorial. Look into it. That's what I'm saying. All right, very quickly, RIZIN 15 is this weekend. It's going to be in Yokohama. There's a bunch of fights on here you couldn't care about, but Mo Lawal in the main event for the inaugural RIZIN Light Heavyweight Championship against a guy whose name I am certainly to mispronounce, Jiri Brzachka.
They've actually fought before.
Oh, have they?
He knocked them out, yeah.
All right, Dan.
Lawal knocked them out.
You can tell I'm not up to
a
date.
thing or two.
I'm not up to date on my Japanese MMA. I apologize.
Or his Russian MMA.
However, Tenshin Nasukawa is back in action in a catchweight bout for kickboxing.
Fighting Pacquiao's boy.
That's right.
Good flyweight
Fritz
fight.
Alden Blagtan. Kyoji Horiguchi against Ben Wynn. That's
going to be a
very,
good
very good fight. Very good fight.
That's a 135?
That is a catchweight of
It's a
60
UFC
kilogram.
fight right there, but just happens to be over there.
Ben Wynn. And then another one that's great is they've got him labeled here as Roberto Souza, but it's Roberto Satoshi. He was the guy that did the Dragon Ball Z thing every time he competed at Metamoris. He's going up against Satoru Kitaoka. So that's a really interesting fight as well. Rina Kubota is going to be back on the card. Damian Brown, UFC vets on the card. Do we have any strong feelings about it? Anybody?
Not strong, no.
I love me some King Mo. I'll be cheering for him, but that's about it. Yeah.
No, that's it. By the way, Justin Scoggins was supposed to be on it. He's not. You know what's funny to me? It sort of occurred to me. It was like all of the people who were like, I had to dig this one in. All of the people who are like, yeah, PED is assault. I feel bad for RIZIN because, I mean, it would stand that those people would take a principled stance and not watch something that would make them moral hypocrites and totally bankrupt. And based on the responses I've gotten, that's a huge portion of the MMA community. So I feel really bad that RIZIN is going to suffer from people being real moral stewards of the arguments that they make to me.
This show needs more honest talk about PEDs, I think.
Yeah. No, the MMA community is not ready to hear it, but everybody who's out there claiming PEDs assault, you better not say one word about this card. Not one. I want to put that out here.
Yeah.
All right. So there we go.
That's the over the radar. Now let's try the under
All right.
the radar.
There you go. Taking my job from me.
He'll host the show, all right?
Taking my job from me. Let's go to it now. Time now for our last segment here. Under the radar, a story that, there was a billion of them this time. A story that was decent, worth being mentioned, but maybe we just didn't get to. Start at this end, we worked our way forward. Chuck, what is under the radar?
Well, we've seen multiple comebacks from this guy. Nick Newell is one time. He's running his turn. He's fighting in in Connecticut, where he's from, with CES coming up, I think, at the end of May. And it's good to see him. I wasn't sure if he'd come back again after he had his big moment, because I know he'd been trying to get in the UFC, and it's kind of the dream of his to fight in the UFC. He had the loss in his last one in the Dana White's Contender Series. So it's good to see him back. I think it was, last July or something like that. So he's coming back, and I've always loved his story, so I'm glad to see he's going to continue on.
All right.
What's under the radar there?
Yeah, anyone who follows my work knows I've got a big beef against UFC just not making a decision about the men's flyweight division. Like, just make a decision. Well, it seems we're close, or we have, because post-fight UFC 236 in Atlanta, Henry Cejudo was there, and he claims, when asked, the flyweights are staying, just ask Dana. Well, we did just ask Dana, and he said, the flyweights are staying, without a big announcement. It did slide under the radar. So that's great, by the way, because they're making a decision, so shout out to all those flyweights. So why in the damn heck is Henry Cejudo fighting for the bantamweight title still? It just doesn't even out.
I think it's.
I hate that fight so much.
I hate the crap out of that fight. Hey, there's a guy named.
They've also cut half the roster.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Joseph Benavidez who beat your champion at flyweight. Just make that damn fight. It's like, I want them to pick a side, and they did, but we're still going to carry on. Bantamweight has names. What are we doing here, Luke? What in the damn hell?
I really don't like that fight at all. It really bothers me. But what I mean,
and I love me some Cejudo, but his shtick is getting corny. All right.
And here's the worst part about that: it's making Marlon say things that he ordinarily wouldn't say either. I don't think he's tried to do the trash talk thing here or there, and he'll up it to like match the intensity of an opponent. But he's not really great at it either. I don't really need to hear from him. His style is so violent. Yeah. All you gotta do is just watch what he does, and he, just mopping the floor with these guys. I don't know. It just doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't.
So what happens if he wins the championship there? What do we do? We're gonna have a vacant interim flyweight championship bout with the two guys who are left in the division. Just like, all right. Sorry.
Yeah. All right, Danny. What's under the radar?
Angela Magaña is in a coma. Apparently, she had an injury in her training camp. She's signed with Combate Americas. And, I believe it was something like a dislocated disc, and she used a nerve blocker, herniated disc, and she used a nerve blocker, I believe to deal with the pain, and which apparently cost her a rare neurological disorder. So she's been posting, or her team in La Perla, Puerto Rico, has been posting a lot of updates on her Twitter account. But apparently, she's in a coma. So wish her well.
You ever eaten at La Perla in Cartagena?
No, I have not.
Super good.
Yeah.
Really good ceviche there.
Great follow-up. She's in a coma. Look, she's in a coma, all right?
Sorry. It just rang a bell in my memory. I apologize. I didn't mean it that way.
Don't worry, he'll host the show. It's fine.
Got me there a little bit. Sorry about that. In any event, so last but not least, Burt Watson, famous babysitter to the stars. He has announced he is starting his own promotion called We Rollin'. Yeah. You can believe that.
We Rollin'.
Isn't that a week after Sean Merriman's new promotion? Let's just keep rolling them out there.
Yeah, well, it's funny that people are doing this a little bit. I'll get to that in just a second. But in any event, I think the first event is going to be a South Florida thing.
Broward County.
There you go. And it's going to be at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. UFC used to go there, I won't say regularly, but they would have smaller fight nights there, not too infrequently. So they're going to go back.
Yoel fought there against Machida.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, he did.
And World Series had a bunch of events there.
Yeah, so it's a popular destination for a lot of reasons. To your point, though, you're right. I had Sean Merriman on my show, too. I think he's going like the Lights Out MMA Pro League or something.
After his bare-knuckle escapade never happened.
And I asked him, where are you going to fight? He's like, I'm going to fight on my show. So I'm like, any kind of Bellator or UFC ambition is done? He was like, yeah, I'm just going to fight on my show. I'm like, okay. I can't really, I don't know much to say about that, so... all right. Well, there you go. Those are the under-the-radar stories, but we are not done. We have taken your tweets using the hashtag #TheMMABeat. We're going to get to them now, so don't go anywhere.
YouTube exclusive.
Oh, yeah. It's a YouTube exclusive. That's right. What am I doing? You only get so many hours of sleep a night. You forget things. So in any event, if you want to join us, you don't have to go anywhere, because After the Beat starts right now. All right, we're back. Time for After the Beat, where we take your tweets using the hashtag #TheMMABeat. And I am joined, of course, by Danny Segura, Brian Campbell, and Iceman himself, Chuck Mindenhall. All right, here we are. Time to get these going. All right, there, Danny, you go first. Dana recently resigned, I should say, for another 7 years. Do you guys think that's too long? I say give us 3 more years of Dana and then hand the reins over to my boy Brian Stan. Now, hold on. Let me say this. I want you to answer the question about Dana. However, the idea that you want to give this job to Brian Stan is truly one of the worst ideas imaginable. And here's why. Brian Stan is too good for us.
Yeah.
The person who takes that role has to say things.
You need the best liars at the top. Man.
Yes. You need a good liar at the top, not Captain America. That would be the most corrupting thing of him imaginable. So, no, I don't want to see that at all. But, ask the question for Dana. What do you think?
Well, I think, in boxing, we've seen promoters, right, last how long? Like
Bob Arum, 87.
87. So,
Yeah, is that a good thing?
not necessarily, but.
Bob's still doing big time work. Luckily, Don King ran out of fighters. But keep going,
So, 7 years, they know it's not that old. I think, there was a time when we've talked about how he kind of felt checked out, but I think we probably need to reassess that because he seems very fired up and he seems very passionate about his work again. I don't know what it is. Sometimes everybody goes through that, in whatever industry. I mean, Greg Jackson, when talking to you on the MMA, he was talking about that. He felt burnt out for a little bit and had to, step back before, getting involved in MMA again and cornering fighters. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, him resigning for 7 years. He's still a very popular figure in the sport. And also, like, who's out there that could possibly replace him?
Chael. No.
Bjorn Rebney, yeah.
Mexico.
It's one of those situations where I feel like cyclically we go back like every couple of years and say like, the organization needed Dana White to get us to this point. Now they need to replace him because they have to sustain. Mm-hmm. It's one of those weird situations. So he cashes in on $360 million during the sale, and you think, and he did seem to check out. He seemed to check out. Didn't seem like he really cared that much anymore. And I thought maybe that was going to start to be the tail end of his era. And he's back in a bigger capacity. And I think these new things like ESPN excite him because it was the goals from way back. I think there's still things out there for him to feel good about and to accomplish.
He's fired up about that Chinese Performance Institute that's opening and like the expansion.
He gets excited about these types of things. You can still see that. There's absolutely a bit of tone, like, we talked about the Greg Hardy's, putting him on the first ESPN card. There's like a tone deaf kind of like, this is my decision. We make a decision. It's north, south, we go. We don't like, and I feel like there's a little bit of like, that will probably get in some hot water at some point, but that's the way the identity of the UFC has worked for so long, that it's just, it would feel weird without him right this second, I feel, you know what I mean? But I would say in another 6 months, that could change again, and you might be like, nah, Dana's had it. We go through this all the time. 7 years is a long time, but he's all we've known in the UFC. Yeah. So it's a difficult question to really to answer. Every time you think he's hurting him, he doesn't. That's all I'm going to say. You know what I mean? Like at the times it seems like he's really doing something that's going to be detrimental. It doesn't seem to bother him, and he doesn't really have to sit under that scrutiny for very long.
You're always going to juggle the good with the bad with him. It's good that he does seem re-inspired to pushing the sport as far as it can go, but he's so uniquely qualified for the job, and you mentioned the sort of the negative qualities you need to have to do this job right, and he's still a great quote, as much as we sit here and debate the things he says, that I couldn't imagine anyone else in that seat. I couldn't even imagine who would replace him, and keep going.
Nobody turns losses into success like him. I think that's his identity. Like he's had so many successes. We would identify everything as upward. Even when it seems like they're falling down, they do something the next step to take the sport somewhere else. It's crazy. I'm not sure anybody else could have done that. So it's a very complicated situation with that guy.
Without knowing exactly what kinds of decisions he's making and how he's making them at a much more minute level, I think it's really impossible to assess replacement or not. You want to say if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but there's a lot of things that could be better. But at the same time, if let's say you had money invested in UFC and he was in charge, would you feel good about it? Probably would, so.
Yeah, there is that Vince McMahon type feeling that as long as he's still driving the ship, you're going to have problems and issues with him, but you trust, for the most part, that you're still going to get a really good.
It's going to get where it's supposed to go, basically.
And he's still edgy enough that's where he retains the trust. That's where he holds it. There's still enough of a connection to the old UFC and the old way of doing things when he would just swear reporters out and say inappropriate things and stuff like that, where there's this iron fist, even though they're completely corporate today, that iron fist, there's still an attraction in there and a trust as a fan that even for us that rip apart the decisions he makes.
Has he blocked you on Twitter?
No.
No? Really? Wow.
Up your game, bro.
Yeah, what are you doing? Step it up, loser.
I sling hot truth and people, they just accept it.
I don't think that's true. Next. Okay, there. Who watches hockey? What did you guys? He put Sergachev. It was what was the guy's name?
Oh, right there.
Said it
The
1,000
knockout.
times,
You
yes.
talk about the knockout?
Yeah. Here, I forgot. I'm having a moment here. The guy's name was Svechnikov.
So this cat was only like 19 years old, right?
Yeah,
And I mean
about 190.
that's a bold thing to drop the gloves.
Did you guys see the hockey fight? Did you see it?
I saw some like people talk about it on Twitter, but I didn't see a clip.
You didn't see the clip?
No.
Bro, he got crushed.
He got
It was really
clocked.
two giant right hands. Perfect setup.
Yeah.
Straight right hand.
I was impressed by that.
What do you think-
Wait,
It's rare that you see a guy really go out.
Yeah, here, I'll show it to you. But let me ask you this while I show it to him. What do you make of the ethics of hockey fighting? Do you think hockey should allow it?
I mean, see, again, it's a complicated question because it's like it's been part of the game, so it's almost a traditionalist attitude to be like, well, you just keep it because that's what they do, you know. And if they want to solve something, they drop the gloves, you know, that sort of thing. I've never minded it, but of course, I cover fighting. It's not like fighting is reprehensible to me, so I don't really mind that being part of the game. But yeah,
Watch.
Danny's watching right now.
yes,
This is Danny's reaction.
couple of right hands.
Okay.
I was impressed that he was that thoroughly out.
Watch.
Like when he goes down, he's out, you know.
Oh,
Yeah, that was right on.
Smoked him, right?
that's some world star. That's some world star.
You would say that, millennial. You know what? I actually don't think they should allow it. I really don't, because I kind of celebrated it because Ovechkin plays for my team. But I don't think they should allow it. But
I mean, if the
people seem
parties
to
are,
love it.
if the parties are okay with
man.
it,
There are goons on the end of
but
that.
Ovechkin's not a goon.
I know he's not. But a lot of the guys who can fight well are actually pretty good players.
Yeah, they've actually gotten rid of the goon
era.
because now like the guy on the Caps who's like their semi-goon, Tom Wilson.
is there a difference between goon and enforcer?
Another same synonymous
thing.
terms.
Okay.
They used to have guys who like literally could not play hockey for S, and then they would just beat, you know, they just crush you in a fight.
Oh,
Now,
what's that guy's name? The Grim Reaper, Stu Grimson? That guy was the best.
oh, then what was his name? The guy who had the CTE profile to the New York Times.
Way to bring us down.
Well, it's the reality. This is partly why the NHL has moved away from it. I just find it kind of crazy that they, like, hockey fans, I would like to tell you that they're split on the ethics of fighting. They're not that split. Most are like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild how they just
Well,
instituted
most of the fights that's a brutal one.
Yeah.
Comparatively.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
most of them are like, you know, guys grab their jerseys, they throw a couple punches,
Yeah.
short ravage, and then
and then
it's
first
over.
person takes the knee
Yes.
on the ice, they just
exactly.
call it.
And
Yeah.
everybody bangs their sticks, and we're like, hey!
It's weird. It's like this old custom of like a
Yeah.
duel out on the front yard between two, you know.
It's funny to me. I mean, the guys learn how to fight on skates. I
Yeah.
remember I did a piece because remember Donald Bashir?
Yeah.
He got into MMA. He had a couple of fights, and I did a piece on him back for ESPN in the day. But I was talking about like how much training he had to do basically as a hockey player, like to learn to fight. He's like, oh, you learn that like any skill. Like you have to know how to fight. You know, if you're a guy who's going to end up fighting. And I was like, you know, just how to fight on skates and when to grab the sweater and all this. I'm like, it's kind of crazy that there's actually a technique to this whole thing.
So this, my wife didn't know this. She didn't really watch hockey. You know, you guys didn't watch hockey in Colombia,
No.
right? She knew what hockey was and had, I guess, seen highlights or something. She didn't know. They don't allow fighting, but in the NBA, if I threw a punch, they like jump on you immediately. Whereas in hockey, they let it play out.
Yeah.
She didn't know they did that. So I took her to a game, and I forget his name. He was 6'7". He played for the Blackhawks for a time. I forget what his name was. And they dropped the gloves and they were circling. She goes, what are they doing? They're about to fight. She goes, they're not going to stop it. I'm like, stop it. They're about to celebrate it. And they went and just dueled it out. It wasn't as like vicious as the Ovechkin one, but it was comparatively quite vicious. She goes, that's part of the game?
Yeah.
I go, that's part of the game.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you really watch hockey and there's some bad blood between the teams for whatever reason, and you know that those two teams are going to play, and something happened in the previous game, and you know this, occasionally you get a really good fight. Like you get the guys who are really meaning to do
Yeah.
harm.
Yeah.
Those are fun because they'll do it right away, like right as the puck drop. They don't even
Yeah.
wait. They just drop the
Yeah.
gloves and go. Those things are
I've
fun.
I've seen guys in penalty boxes talk to each other and be like, as soon as we get out, you want to duke it out? Get out of the penalty box
Yeah.
and immediately drop and go.
But,
makes
but
it
go to low-level
kooky, man?
minor league hockey, and it's like expected. It's
Yeah.
part of it. It's
Oh,
like it's actually.
Yeah,
part of the
I'm
game.
more
Yeah.
opposed to that, where it's like they feel they have to.
Bro, that's the Hunger Games down there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
do you
different.
remember in Connecticut the Danbury Trashers?
Yeah.
That like low. They were run by an organized
Yeah.
crime family.
Yes.
The fights that used to go on in that tiny place were
Yeah.
just friggin' insane. Yeah.
You've never been to any of this stuff?
I think I went to a hockey game. I saw the Panthers play, but I don't know. I don't remember watching any fights. But I know it's a very physical sport. And I know about the fighting. I've seen I've seen clips and stuff. I respect it. I think it's cool, but like I think as long as the parties involved are okay with it, like hey, go for it. Plus, they're not long fights, right? It's like 10, 15
They're pretty
seconds.
short.
They go
Yeah,
at it.
they're pretty short.
They're
pretty
quick.
short.
Yeah.
Every now and again you get a long one, but they're quick.
Yeah.
In college hockey, by the way, none of
Can
that
you fight in
happens.
NCAA?
You cannot.
No?
So, like, you see them, like, get into it, and then they just kind of
Also,
stop. They want to. You see them want to, but they don't get into
How
it.
often do knockouts happen? Because I figure with the
Like that?
skates,
Very rare.
with
rare.
the skates, you can't really plant it.
Can't get leverage, yeah.
No, you can't. Look at
It's
Ovechkin.
all- it's
Go
all
back and
muscle,
watch.
you know?
Ovechkin leans on the front of his skates while Svechnikov is kind of flat on them, so he's like driving into the punch. Part of the reason why he got
Every now and
flatlined.
again, if you're at a really lucky game, you'll see the goalies go at each other. That's the best.
yeah.
The
I've never
goalie
seen
fight.
that.
The goalie fight.
I've
I'll
seen
start
it.
tuning into
Really
Paul.
fun. Yeah.
Paul's good.
I just think this conversation has been a revelation that they call you Iceman for a reason. You are a
I do
degenerate.
like that stuff.
All right, next. Chuck, this one's for you. Greetings, learned panel. My advice for a young MMA writer knee-deep in writing free content on how to take the big step into paid roles. Or is it just the case of making like Rick Ross and hustling? Here's one thing I hate about the modern world and modern parlance. Everyone's like, yo, man, you got to hustle. They don't ever explain what the hell that means. You mean just work hard? You can work hard and get nowhere. That doesn't do you any good. You have to work
Such a
strategically.
different day and age too, and there's so much content and so many sites, and you could just run your own blogs and everything. It's just a different world. Like the ones back in the day, there was certain places that paid, and you wanted to get in those doors. It was just as simple as that. But these days, there are so many places. If you're just trying to get your name out there, bylines and stuff, everybody wants to go this route of just getting exposure, and I really, truly don't know. I've had people ask me this so many times. How do I start getting paid, or how do I become, a writer? I'm like, you gotta show people you can write. That's got to be the first step. But at some point, you got to say, now I deserve to be paid, and you got to go into someplace, someplace reputable, and start getting paid. I mean, you got to give them the samples, and hopefully that's enough. You know what I mean? But there's really I don't know a better route than that.
No, the reps, whether you want to be on air or write, you can get, and you're not going to be good. You're not going to be great early, so the only way to get there is reps, and the reps are going to be free, or they'll be offline, but just keep getting reps. It's, yeah.
I would agree. And yeah, like Rick Ross, every day I'm hustling. You know that song? It's an old song.
There's a new
Yes, I
logo.
know that song.
But yeah, I mean,
Ross.
just work hard, man. Be nice to people. That's like super important. Like that I've.
At some point, you
something
got
I've
to know
learned.
your worth, though. You have to
Yeah.
know that you're worth it. And I feel like that's your own. You have to be able to look at your stuff critically and say, like, I know this is good. I should be paid for this. You also have to know when you're turning in garbage. And I feel like most guys don't know that they're turning in garbage.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one, but I think it's self-examination. After you do the reps, I think you have to learn what you're reading, is it good or not. And read, more than anything, anybody should read as much as they can, people like the people who've established themselves, and see what they're doing and try to understand structurally how they do it, everything about what they're doing, and emulate it to an
But
extent.
with that said, it is the best time to try it, to try to
Sure.
create bobsmmablog.com, and before you know it, you could be changing the game and doing something different and getting access and getting attention. That
Let me just say, in the MMA side, I don't do as much writing as I used to. In fact, I do almost none. But what I have noticed is every time someone sends me an email being like, hey, can you look at my work? It's just the same boilerplate stuff as anybody else. Hey, here's my fight picks. Here's my analysis.
Right.
Here's my whatever. And you have to understand, like, the only way you would ever want to do fight picks or analysis is if you are one of the very best people doing it, or you can do it on a platform that is one of the biggest. Otherwise, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. You're not going to be better than Dan Hardy, right? You're not going to be better than as a writer, you're not going to be better than Chuck. Now, you might be. Chances are you're not going to.
Probably not.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you just
kidding.
Yeah, no. But someone was saying, like, I want to get into writing and I want to be as good as pick your favorite writer, whoever the thing is. Chances are you're not going to be as good as them. You might be, but the chances are you're not. What you have to find a way to do is you have to have, to your point, an honest assessment of the work. What kind of work can I do that the industry doesn't have and it needs? And you gotta ask yourself what those questions are. And then you have to try. And a lot of your stuff's going to fail. I've had a lot of things I thought were decent, and then they end up not being great. I had some things I thought were not great that ended up being very successful. So it's like...
That show with the manila folder, that was great. I still stand by that.
It was great. I got
This
tired
stuff
of it.
that's not there anymore, man.
You know what? I've said this a million times. When I was doing that show, I couldn't pay someone to watch it. Then the minute I quit, which I didn't get canceled, I quit. I remember I got hit up every day for a year, being like, "What happened to the show, man? I loved it." I'm like, the numbers don't prove that. Actually, the numbers prove that you didn't watch.
Just starting to take off.
It was right at the moment. Right at the moment. I'm still bitter about everything, if that's what you're wondering. In general, I mean, in life.
Also, find a good editor. If you can find a good editor who can help you and get you, I mean, that's easier said than done. There aren't a ton of them, but if you can find that guy who's going to help you get better, that's what you should stick with that guy,
Yeah, and also, here's the other thing. It's like on the YouTube side of things, for example, like there's a lot of MMA content on YouTube. But for example, one of the reasons why I explored it personally was I look around my MMA media brethren. No one's really doing it on their own. There's a lot of sites that have it, and those are great. MMA Fighting, this is where we're doing it. But on an individual level, there wasn't anyone who was doing it by themselves. I was like, well, there's an opportunity. Let me see if it worked. And so far, it's going okay. But it's things like that. It's market opportunities. It's talent opportunities. What does MMA not have that you can provide? But like predictions and analysis, bro, the boat is full.
Got to get those takes hot.
Yeah.
And wearing,
really hot.
Wearing hats, it's taken. All right, come on.
Ascots are still out there.
God. All right, next. Okay, to the table. If you could only watch non-UFC MMA, would you be a fan? Now, isn't that a good question?
That's a good question. I would say no.
I would say probably not much of it.
That is actually
So
true.
you could watch Bellator 1, RIZIN.
Now, would UFC
what,
not
man?
exist, or would I just not have access to it?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Could you follow it? Because if you follow it, at least like
You knew what happened?
you would know what happened.
I think so.
Imagine you could, let's just state the question as is. You can only watch.
I don't think so. I went to the last Bellator at Mohegan Sun. Were you at that one too? Whatever the last one was, who was on that card? It was actually a good card. Well, it was MVP against Daly.
Yeah.
There was a couple of, Roy Nelson was on there.
Broke up.
But it was, how would you say it? Like, it was so bad. The card, it was depressing in the end. Like the.
Yeah, but how much of that is just luck?
Well, I would say that I find that happens.
MVP versus Daly was the
It
fight.
should have been, and I think that's part of it. There was an expectation of that fight that just didn't come to.
They also watered down the card. They did a fight.
They watered down the card, and I'm like, let's just put all that together, and that happens more often than not. And they do have good fights sometimes, frequently, but if you just take that card, and I've been to other ones at Mohegan Sun, I don't know if maybe it's just the venue, that happens, and I think that would not. I don't think that would carry enough excitement for me in the end. I mean, unless they start the matchmaking really, they bring in more talent. There's more, the matchmaking. It's not as transparent to like, hey, let's give Fortune 9 guys in a row who are anonymous that nobody knows. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if the model was the same. That's all.
Yeah, I would still be a fan, but just not as much.
Yeah. I'm
same.
sure I would watch, but I'm not sure.
Two guys fighting is always going to be compelling for me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, but what's super interesting is the high level
course.
MMA. Like we just saw Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum, Poirier, Holloway.
mean,
And that's mostly seen in the UFC. And even then, it's
If
even in
Mousasi's
the
fighting
UFC,
every time I'm watching, if it's Rory McDonald,
right.
you know what I mean? Like there's guys like that you're going to watch. I mean,
People watch college basketball. I do not know why, but they watch college basketball. Imagine you couldn't watch the pros.
Virginia was the worst winner I've ever. That was the bad.
Are you a March Madness guy?
Not anymore, but I was obviously forever. But that was because the Big East died, and it took a piece of my soul. It was territorial.
Yeah.
That's true.
It was alma mater.
I try to watch college basketball. I love basketball. I love pro basketball. If you watch pro basketball, I was talking to Chuck about this. I was watching Pacers and Celtics last night. If you watch that game, how you can be a fan of college basketball is beyond me. Like they don't even look the same. It's not even the same species of athlete, but whatever. People love terrible things. All right, next. Table, what is everyone's thoughts on advertising tattoos? For example, getting a website or brand tattooed on themselves and being paid by said owner. I find this used to happen in UFC very briefly, and in boxing. Golden Palace was the one. It is.
Actual tattoo?
Well, either.
Oh, you're talking about, okay, never mind.
Fake temporary.
Okay.
I think
They do that. KSW does it.
Yeah,
Those guys are always
you get
wearing
on the
their-
back.
I find it low budget. I don't like it.
I
at all.
agree with you 100%.
You know what's funny? I think GSP actually had that in one of his early fights when he fought Ivan Menjivar. Like way back
yeah?
in the day before he was in
You
the
might be
UFC.
right.
Bernard Hopkins
He had
it for
sprayed
a while,
on
too.
all
Have you
over
seen
his
that
back,
fight?
yeah.
Like this, the
Something about
the
it.
breakthrough
The human
fight. Straight
billboard?
that 9/11
I don't
fight.
like
He's
it.
got Golden Palace on the back. It's like.
The human billboarding thing is like, I was watching what's the Strongman. Puig, whatever. his name is.
Pujanowski,
Yeah.
Mariusz Pujanowski, the greatest strongman ever.
And obviously he's got a nice big broad back, and so did the other guy. And
Still
you're
a lot
like,
of ads
so you're seeing like the ads pretty big, and I was like, that makes sense, but it doesn't feel
Lot of
right
ad
to me,
space,
man. And I don't know why. It's just because it's your skin. Like, come on, have some. Like, there has to be a line, but maybe other people don't feel that way. But I had no problem with the trunks being littered with whatever people wanted on them, but the skin, it feels weird to me.
I think if you're going to do it, you got to do it the right way, where when people who didn't like you would pay you $30,000 to put their logo on the soles of your shoe. So when you got knocked out, they could see your logo as your feet came up.
Dude wipes. Yes.
Yeah, something like that I thought was okay, but like, it just feels like, oh my God, where are we when we're watching dudes get that kind of thing airbrushed on their back? Yeah. And I love KSW, don't get me wrong, it's a great show. And here,
I'd love to go to one of their shows.
Good fighters have done it. So it's not like a thing that only low budget fighters have done, but yeah, I don't know. There's something sad about it, kind of.
I thought the question actually meant tattoos. I think Vice did this feature on this guy that just had a bunch of face tattoos, and it was just websites and stuff, and he would just take the money. They were actually like real tattoos.
Would you get an Arby's tattoo on your back? I mean, who would do that? No. Is there any brand you would get a tattoo on your back?
No. I mean,
what about this? What about the Jordan or the Nike like swoosh logo?
There's a dude that has a Nike tattooed on his face. No, I wouldn't get that. No,
Man, this is a low rent.
I wouldn't get it
after the beat, right?
Bro, I work with what they give me. Well, you know what I'm saying?
Brands,
some classy list, some Chinese symbols and some barbed wire.
Yeah, that's what you mean. Some wings. No?
Nope.
Any brand you would ever
I was mad even when the NBA finally agreed to put advertising. I felt like that was like a violation of something that was long held.
Yeah, I hate it.
And it opens up.
It's one of the things I hate about European soccer jerseys. Yeah. Where the logo will be like this on this part of the chest, and then the middle Fly Emirates or.
I think some kind of look cool though. It depends. Depends who your sponsor is.
Well, make up your mind. Is it cool to have those kinds of sponsors or no?
You got to get the right sponsor.
Okay, what's the right sponsor?
Dynamic.
Well, it depends on the team.
Dynamic Fastener.
That is
It
the correct
depends. It
answer.
depends on the team, but like
Who was the one for Atletico?
Hyundai is a sponsor, and then they have something 500.
Bro, they used to have one about visiting Azerbaijan on their jerseys.
Really?
Low rent, man.
I mean,
Low
it's
rent.
not the not the richest team in the world, you know.
I hate it. And Barcelona's whole thing with the UNICEF thing I didn't like, and even the new one about whatever it is. I forget what the name of the brand is. I mean, I don't like Madrid's either. I don't like any of them, dude. With these giant ass logos of brands. It's like, what are you looking at here?
I know.
It sucks. So don't do it.
Church and
American
state,
football.
man. Too much of an infringement there.
Or how about do they still do this in American football where you'd see like a wide receiver get tackled and then from the sleeve it would come up and then on the shoulder pads it would be like Gatorade ads? You ever seen that?
No.
And so you'd see him like fumble with it and it'd be like covering a Nike logo or a Gatorade logo and I'd be like, oh my God, really? All right, next. Do you believe some MMA fighters quit mid-fight and give up a submission like Paulie said a few weeks back? Now, Brian, I'm going to throw this one to you. Because Paulie was on this show and he was like, some MMA fighters are getting beat up and they just want to give their back. And he was saying it about Conor. I'm just saying in a general way, do you think what he is saying is true?
I do.
100%.
In a general way, it's the same thing in boxing where you sort of take a punch and you go down to a knee and you wait for the 10 count. And you try to rise at 10 purposely late so the referee waves it off. It's a way of quitting without quitting. I'm for sure. No one like BJ Penn said, only a bitch taps out and strikes. Nobody wants to do that. So give up your back, let him put it around you, you tap the heck out.
Yeah. How many times have you talked to a coach or, somebody in that capacity, but usually a coach, and they're like, you'll hear them say, he wanted a way up, he wanted a way out. They see it, you know what I mean? So it happens. It's probably, I'm guessing the better guys at it would basically be the ones that you don't really, they make it look seamless, but I've certainly seen some ones where you're like, dude, come on, he gave up his back. Like you just see him roll into something or whatever, he wants out of there. I wouldn't name names, but I'm sure.
Are you saying Shane Carwin against Brock Lesnar? Is that what you're saying right now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
No, I'm not saying that one. But you've seen him.
It happens all the time. It happens.
You see it. The high level pros are good at disguising it. So if you go to like a regional card, I saw one guy who one time was on all fours, and there was another guy standing over him, just punching him in the face, and he wasn't even resisting or hurt. He just didn't want to keep doing this anymore, and the referee kind of stepped in. But you had to watch it. Like, he was clearly almost looking at the ref being like,
Yeah.
you know, they don't have really the skills to disguise it. A good fighter will find a way to camouflage it
Right.
a little bit.
The regional shows, especially the times I've watched them, you'll see multiple of those in a night.
Oh yeah, several.
for sure.
There's just guys going in there, they're just trying it out, and they're like,
Yeah.
they realize right away this isn't for them.
You'll see guys like 0-1, 1-0, 2-1. They want to see if this is anything to it, and they meet somebody who's a buzzsaw, and they're like, "Oh, I've had enough of this."
Yeah.
And I don't like in boxing. There's still stigma to it, and I guess there's some stigma to it in MMA about the tapping to strikes. But honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal as it used to be in MMA. And you know, fighting is awful.
It's hard. Yeah, if you went out, you went out, man.
Yeah.
I want out. I haven't even been in.
Yeah.
All right, next. I need to rebuild my blown over fence this weekend, and it got me thinking. Hypothetical question. It's a Saturday morning. The fence material, tools, and beer are ready. What UFC fighter are you calling to give you a hand getting the fence back up
What a
and
great
running?
question.
I love this one. Now, would have said Demetrius Johnson, but he's
has
not. But he's not a UFC fighter.
Ah.
I was
So
going to
that's
say
the key.
Stephen Bonner for entertainment, but he's not a UFC fighter.
I'd say Jim Miller. That guy looks like
Oh, what a great call! What a great
he would have
call!
that fence up within about 45 minutes, and then it's just beer drinking with Jim Miller.
You know what? The beer drinking could have started while you were building the fence. I don't know why the two have to be segregated. That's such a good one.
Brock Lesnar. Be a good one.
Does he seem friendly enough to want to build a fence with?
His hands are too big for that.
Well, I mean, physically, I feel like he's probably
No, but that's
probably take most of the work.
See, that's a communal experience. You need somebody who you can spend the time
okay.
with.
All right. Let me.
You're not hiring a manual labor.
Yeah.
What do you think, Brian? Anybody stand out?
I mean, it's you're
Jim Miller's
making
a
me
good
want to
one.
bring up Jim Miller type, honest, blue collar journeyman level guys that I'm assuming they can work really hard because they probably do that job on the side.
I don't know how much of a handyman he is, but I would say Diego Sanchez.
Yeah.
Because he would just work hard, and he would probably have a couple beers, a couple pops with me. You know,
Probably have some good stories to
have
tell.
some crazy
I
stories.
mean, Forrest Griffin is kind of fits that mold. A
little bit, yeah.
entertaining,
Yeah.
blue collar guy.
Darren Elkins.
I
I bet he knows how to build a fence.
He probably has some good stories
He'd
too.
bleed. He'd find a way to bleed.
Is there anybody, like, again, because DJ had the construction background, but he doesn't qualify anymore
Yeah.
given his status.
Clay Guida used to be
David Branch used to work in construction.
Did he really?
Yeah.
How did I not know that? So that'd be a decent call as well. Which one did you Clay? The Clay Guida?
Yeah.
That's a genius call.
The carpenter.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's
I
all-
think he would enjoy it. There's certain guys you have to think, like, would they enjoy doing a project?
Yeah.
That strikes me as a guy who would enjoy doing a project.
given the name, you would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, do you have a green thumb at all?
Not really.
Nah, bro, not me at all. I hate that
Yeah.
stuff. Like, yeah, let me go get bit by mosquitoes to do poor craftsmanship. I'll pass, thanks.
Very sexist answers. Are you going to consider Pro Gonzalez for this?
Should I have?
Whatever you like.
It's up to you.
Why would you bring up her name if there's not a reason to bring up her name? And by the way, she's an Invicta, not UFC.
That's true.
I knew that.
Caught you slipping, didn't
I
I?
knew that. I knew that.
Caught you slipping.
Tell that to the New York State Athletic Commission.
What?
Buffalo 211. Look it up. Next.
All right, I think that's it. I think we're done. All right, so that is it for us today. We are definitely not going to be on next week because if my child is not born before then, my wife will be induced on that day. So ain't no way I'm going to be here next week. And I don't know about the week after that either, to be quite candid with you. So they're going to have to figure out something. But there might be a bit of a break in the show, just so everyone knows ahead of time, because I've reproduced everybody.
Hey.
I've got to bring a life into this world, which I'm sure is scarier for you than it is for me. All right, so that's it for us. But keep sending us those tweets using the hashtag the MMA Beat. We always appreciate it. There was a bunch this time. I can only get to what I can get to, but we thank everyone for sending us. Thanks so much for watching the show. As always, that is Chuck, Brian, Danny. I am Luke. Until next time, hands up, chin down, let them fly. This is the MMA Beat.